Oh, yes.
You know, that
bipartisan.
Bipartisan, and it doesn't seem like I have necessarily her cell or her phone number, so I'm a messenger. I'll tell her to call in, or at least ask her what's the best phone number. So anyhow, Eric, have you heard at all about the bill?
Oh, of course. Yeah, it's a big deal. And absolutely all sides, it's something that appeals. It's interesting that it truly is bipartisan. It's not just bipartisan. It's also across a large portion of the political spectrum. And what happened is more libertarian-leaning conservatives, those who want to take away as much power as is feasible from the government, combined with much more liberal leftists who want to see, quote unquote, fairness, because as we know, the way the laws work, or I should say the way the justice system works, the net result of who gets incarcerated isn't really fair. If you look at it from various perspectives, including most especially racially. And so.
Yep.
Hello.
Hey, Dr. Cole, we have you back. And Eric was just, we're talking about that first headline about the crime bill. Now we have you in a much better signal. And so, Eric, why don't you finish that thought, and then we'll let Dr. Cole kind of, bring in what you want to say.
Okay, well, I haven't really described it. We can leave that up to Clarissa. What I was saying is the significance of it is it really does reach all the way across the political spectrum. It's a rare event where I don't know if there was any dissent. There was very little anyway. It was overwhelmingly approved by the Senate. And what it does is it looks to pull back on the system of incarceration that people across the spectrum, conservatives, liberals, everyone in between, many in between, view as costly and unfair. And we've said this how many times on this show, over and over and over and over and over. Clarissa in particular has told us, we have a vastly overpopulated prison system. If you look at any other country in the world, we have a much higher percentage of our population is incarcerated than any other first world country. And I forget, I can't even remember what country of any socioeconomic or political type, is in our ballpark in terms of the percentage. So we have too many people in jail. They stay in prison/jail too long on average. We're still haven't come close to purging the system of what are now basically no longer relevant drug crimes. People in jail for those, and it's just too expensive. So for all of those reasons, it's a rare, very positive event that people reached across the aisle, reached across the political spectrum. And we're able to, it's called the First Step Act, and it's doing a lot of positive things, expanding.
Yes, and I would like to temper that.
Sure, absolutely.
Go for it. Your turn.
No, I'm hearing a lot of excitement about this, and people are forgetting one really huge element of this. This is for federal prisoners only, okay? And that is a huge tempering point. There are only about 170-some thousand federal prisoners nationwide. And just to give you an idea, there's 125,000 prisoners just in California.
Oh, geez.
So,
wow.
And the vast majority of these federal prisoners, I'm sorry, but people don't generally get locked up on a federal beef for low-level drug charges. It's not typically how it works. So while this is a good symbolic step, I want to make everybody very aware of that this is not going to open the floodgates and release a bunch of people. There aren't very many. It's not really going to help with a lot of the rehab programs. Federal prisons have always had those in spades. It's the state systems that don't. Again, I see this as largely symbolic. I'm glad people are celebrating. That's wonderful. But this, again, only applies to federal prisons. So let's keep that in mind.
So it's kind of Yeah, it's
not reform.
It's kind of much ado about nothing, is what it is, because it's not going to do anything.
Well, it upsets me because people are like, oh, good, reform. I'm like, no, reform for the federal prisons. The states still have their own sweeping laws and sentences when it comes to drug crimes, when it comes to the three strikes law. I think that this is just opening the door for states to lower some of their sentencing guidelines too. Mm-hmm. You know, the states don't want to have lesser sentences than the feds do, right? So the feds lowering those guidelines, I think they're hoping will encourage states to do the same. But the people that suffer due to these really stringent laws are state inmates, not federal.
Yeah.
Very good point. I'm maybe coming down. I haven't done the research yet, certainly, and don't have the firsthand knowledge that Clarissa has. But I would still say that it's. I think it's more than symbolic. I do think it will have a real effect on those who it does happen to impact. But I think in the long run, hopefully, we will see states then able to refer to this and use it as an example, and hopefully it's the beginning of some serious reform. That's, I think, what we would all like to see, and of course the states are next. Do we know what the national population is
of
prisoners?
Yes, it's 175,000 approximately. That's the national rate of federal prisoners.
Right, but all prisoners. State prisoners.
Oh, gosh, no. I don't know all states. I know California is close to that. I know that Wisconsin has 25,000. So extrapolate from there, but it's millions. It's millions and millions. So 175,000 is a drop in the proverbial bucket. But like you're saying, I'm hoping that it will open the door for states to do the same. But it's really not going to have the impact that people think it is. These people that Kardashian and, one of the, cases that she brought before President Trump was a state inmate. Nothing is happening with that inmate. She's a state inmate. I want people to be aware that a lot of this is a bunch of, I'm going to pat myself on the back for a victory that is actually not going to affect the people that it's meant to affect eventually. It's a good first step, as the measure is called. So
okay, now if you had a magic wand, Dr. Cole, what would you like to see happen by all states as well? I mean, just across the board.
I would like to see a parole process that is more informed. These measures that people come up with are horrible. I do not agree with them. I never have. This idea of, hey, let's let out all nonviolent third strike inmates. Terrible idea for one very good reason. The reason that they're there, maybe they're only judging it on the most recent offense, their most recent lockup, right? Mm-hmm. Which might be low-level drug offense. But their prior to incarcerations may have been for rape or homicide. Mm-hmm. You don't know. Mm-hmm. So to do these big sweeping measures, that's not where to start with prison reform. I would know. I've been doing it a long time. A better parole process for the inmates we already have and better sentencing guidelines for the new people coming in would be great. But these huge sweeping measures to just decimate the prison population that we have right now to stop the overcrowding, it's a bad idea. People will be hurt if you do that. So, you know what I mean? It needs to be an informed process, and it's going to take a while, too. It's not going to happen overnight, and that's not what people want to see. They want it to happen yesterday, and that's the hard part.
We need an island. That's what we need, is an island, much like Great Britain did with Australia. Just send them all to the island. Just give them an island and drop provisions there once a year or something. Let them live amongst each other.
It's sad because there are people in prison that don't need to be. Absolutely. But again, they're not the people that anyone wants to let out. And that's the problem. People by and large want to let out young inmates. Yeah. Inmates with a lot of life ahead of them. That's what they want to see. They want to see young inmates getting out because, it was just a drug conviction. Wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks good on the news, but that's the wrong population.
Yeah, well, very true. Very true. Well, hopefully this does lead to more reform, common sense reform down the road, but on a state-by-state basis where it doesn't become common sense. And
I think we're seeing... I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joel.
I was going to say we all can hope for that common sense to rule the day.
I think we're seeing the pendulum swing, is what I rudely interrupted to say. In so many topics, maybe all topics, we see this great swing. So back in the 90s, we had a really hardcore, we had the, broken windows movement.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the three strikes laws put into place. We saw a much harsher take. What happened? Crime went down. Why? Because you're taking criminals off the streets, even if it wasn't particularly fair. So, but if you're just looking at numbers and percentages, crime went down. Why wouldn't it? There's fewer criminals out there. So then, over time, it starts swinging the other way. Hey, wait a minute. This isn't fair. This isn't fair. That part wasn't fair. Ooh, I didn't like that one at all. Whoa, that's not fair. Wow, this is very expensive. And on and on and on and on. So now it swings all the way back the other way. And wherever we do end up in terms of, actual reform and people being released, eventually some of those people will commit mayhem and problems, and we'll have a hue and cry to head back the other way in a more punitive direction. I think ultimately, though, and I would love to hear Clarissa's thoughts on this. She's talked about it many times before, but love to hear it again now, is what is the real way forward? How do we become, how do we create a prison and not just prison, but a justice system that does look to the future, that does improve people, that does reform people, that is not overly punitive, but is not wishy-washy either? What is the way forward in your opinion? And who would know better than you?
Well, first of all, Canada would know. They'd absolutely know. They are experts at it. They have been leading the pack for a long time when it comes to prison and prison reform. And they have an extremely low recidivism rate on violent crime in Canada. And it's not because they have a lot less violent criminals. It's actually not the fact at all. Their rate of violent crime is very similar to ours in a lot of areas, right? But they're focused purely on rehabilitation from the second the inmate walks in the door, because they have every intention of releasing them. Even if they're murderers, they have every intention of releasing. And we do not do that here. And the other thing is that their parole boards are informed. Our parole boards are appointed people that are friends of the governor. Let's be honest. That's who they are. Most of them are ex-cops or ex-judges. And believe it or not, even if they have contact with the justice system, it doesn't actually make them experts on recidivism. They don't know what to look for. So if a guy sounds sorry, they let him back out on the street. And the thing is, you can let people back out on the street with, like Eric, you were saying, the pendulum will swing back the other way. People will get hurt. Not if you do it right. That's what I'm trying to say. There's less than 1% recidivism rate here in California because we do parole of lifers differently. Okay. Less than 1%.
Wow.
And in other states, the role of recidivism for violent crime is somewhere around the 38% level. Why don't you flip a coin? Why don't you?
Wow.
It's terrible.
Man.
Terrible. Massachusetts was 35% last year. So 35% of the guys they let out committed another violent crime. Our percentage here was less than 1%.
Wow.
That's because we're doing it differently. We're doing it differently.
Amazing.
Well, not with all prisoners, but with lifers. We're doing it
Yeah.
differently. We're basing it on the Canadian model. That's what California's been doing now for the last 10 years with lifers, and it's working. Just like it is in Canada, it's working. So can it be done? Yes, but will it be done for no expense and just opening the doors? Unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
You got to train people.
Yeah. Well, that hopefully we start moving more towards that model of things here in every state.
I hope
that it goes across the board, because if it works, it works. I mean, these are still human beings. I mean, they can be reformed under the right circumstances. They can definitely be reformed, and also part of reforming though is also the community helping reform.
Oh, absolutely,
you know what I mean?
Like and they have that. I mean, California has been very good about the entire state helping that process, like putting programs, up for them. Like there was a whole program in San Francisco that just ex-lifers, they're the only staff members for this program.